Hello everybody, Kevin Keith here again. Again, the screen is black because you need to listen to the voice like an old-fashioned radio show instead of focusing on the face. If you want the face, Google it. Although I don't approve of that mugshot. Alright, before I've mentioned that MSA was a rip-roaring success right out of the gate. It was a bigger success than anybody had figured that it would be. And, well, frankly, I want to comment on it. If success is measured by the number of students who are attempting to enroll into the program, then MSA was a runaway success. Again, originally it was envisioned to be between 300 and 500 students, and it quickly became apparent after MSA opened up servicing grades 7, 8, and 9, and then the following year it scooted down a year, so it was 6, and it scooted up a year to grade 10, so from grade 6 to 10, it became apparent that whenever the school went full throttle K through 12, there would be an overwhelming demand for a seat at the MSA. This was because of a couple of reasons. The first reason was because MSA was not shy about bragging about its successes on state testing. Every year, a couple of times a year, pamphlets were sent out, glossy, nice, very professionally made pamphlets would be sent out to every home in the parish, advertising the supposed successes of the MSA Academy and all of the non-traditional classes such as dance and art and orchestra and jazz and etc. that were offered at MSA that weren't offered in other schools in the parish. And believe me, that's a whole other can of worms right there. But there was all of this success, and there was a huge demand from the part of a lot of parents to get their kids enrolled at MSA. A good part of that demand, to be honest with you, was from white parents who had grown tired of having to pay high price for their kids to attend St. John's School in order not to have to deal with the black kids at Plaquemine High. So whenever MSA opened up and it seemed like a new and enthusiastic place and it was having some successes and it was basically advertised out there as a rip-roaring new way to do education that was having a tremendous amount of success in doing it, well, these white parents at St. John figured that it would be a much better deal for them to withdraw their children from their enrollment at St. John and put them into MSA. Now, supposedly to get into MSA, you were supposed to be a part of what they call a lottery system, where you were assigned a number, and then it was put into this random number generator system, and you would be let in that way. But everybody knew very quickly that the way to get your kid into MSA was to go talk to Elvis Cavalier personally over the summer before the school year started, or to contact your local school board member. Whichever way that you chose, your child was going to get in, especially if he or she were a kid that was trying to transfer into MSA from St. John. Because one of the problems that had plagued Iberville Parish schools before the Consiena era was that so many white children had fled the local public schools to go to private schools, mainly St. John here in Plaquemine, for convenience sake. And the district wanted to get those kids back where it felt they belonged, in public education. So it was a real easy ticket to get in. But there were other parents who had sent their kids to private schools in Baton Rouge, and there were even more besides who had sent their kids illegally to Bruley Middle School and Bruley High School to get them out of Plaquemine schools. They would lie about where they lived and would send their kids illegally across district boundaries. And that was not uncommon or unheard of for sure. And MSA kind of drew them back. It was so much more convenient to have a school bus that could bring your kid from your house to the school instead of having to drive your kid all the way up to Bruley or to some private school in Baton Rouge. And it was so much cheaper to send your kid to the public school academy than it would have ever been to, obviously, to spend thousands of dollars a year on tuition to send your kid to a purportedly Catholic school. And I say purportedly because, believe me, I've never met kids so immoral as the ones that came from St. John, except for the ones who were part of First Baptist Youth Group. But anyways, success as defined by the school and advertised by the school brought more students, way more than we could handle at first. Whenever Elvis Cavalier and the school board decided that it was time to open up MSA to everybody grades K through 12. We just didn't have the faculty. There wasn't enough faculty. I remember that year I had over 180 students. And this is coming off the heels of a very successful school that sent out, well, what I thought was a very successful school, that sent out pamphlets all across the parish to every household in the parish saying that we have no class sizes larger than 20. I had classes of 35. It was a patent lie that they were sending out to all the different parents in the parish in an attempt to get even more students in. Because more students equals, dun dun dun, more money. You guessed it. With every student who attends school at a public school in Iberville Parish, the Iberville Parish School Board gets a certain amount of money from the state. It's called an MFP formula. So the more students who were enrolled at MSA that we got back from Bruley or that we got back from private schools, that was more money into the coffers of the Iberville Parish School Board. That was one of the main objectives of starting an academy program. The trouble was that we didn't have the space, first of all, and second of all, we didn't have the faculty to cover them all. So the class sizes ballooned. They became ridiculous. And it also brought another problem, okay? As MSA became more well-known, we began to take in students who not just were from Iberville Parish, but had formerly been attending schools outside of the public school system in Iberville Parish. But we began to draw in students from Donaldsonville, Baton Rouge, Livonia, Pier Park, West Baton Rouge Parish, people who lived in Addis, who lived in Bruley, but wanted to send their kids down to MSA. We even had one student that I taught, she was from Prairieville, and her mom would come pick her up every day. These students, not always, but on the whole, they tended to be the dregs of their local school districts. They were the ones who were about to flunk out, or the ones who were being bullied because they had naked pictures going around, or, you know, they always had some kind of a story to them, some kind of a background. So in addition to the huge influx from the private schools and from other districts of Iberville Parish natives, we also had a big influx of people who were just not wanting to go to their home districts. They wanted to come to MSA because there was a perception out there that MSA was a hugely successful, non-traditional learning environment school that was making a big impact on kids' lives. That was what was advertised. But the truth is, that is not at all what was happening. I was there on the front lines every day. Here's what was happening. There were bigger forces at work than just Elvis Cavalier or school board members or even Dr. Consian. Much bigger forces at work. One I've already hinted at, which was the racial thing. Much better to send your kid to a school that ends up being 60 or 65% white, if you're a white parent, right, than to risk sending them to Plaquemine High. But another thing that really was going on was the lowering of standards. You see, at MSA, they were not incorrect to tell people that they had a huge success rate on getting students to pass state standardized tests. But what had happened was we had a new state superintendent of education, the one that we currently have, an incompetent buffoon named John White. And what ended up happening was that as John White was state superintendent of schools, the State Department of Education so dramatically lowered the bar on what it means to actually pass one of these state tests, whether it's the end of course exams or the LEAP test or the iLEAP test or now the PARC exams. It is almost embarrassing to think back on what constitutes a passing score on these state exams. I remember the first year of the EOC exams. One of the tested subjects is Algebra 1, and that year, boy, we had an influx of students, and we had huge class sizes and an overextended faculty. But boy, did we have a crackerjack Algebra 1 teacher. She was really putting her nose to the grindstone every day. She worked her fingers to the bone with those kids that year, and whenever the results came in May, you know, of course, all the freshmen were running to her room. They wanted to know if they had passed or not. And she told me excitedly in the hall that we had only had 4 students who had failed the Algebra 1 EOC. Just 4. Out of a freshman class of about 110, 120, whatever it was that year. It was a lot for MSA. Out of that freshman class, only 4 had failed. And that was a weak group of freshmen, believe you me. They were not the sharpest knives in the drawer. And I said, wow, that's one hell of an accomplishment. You should really be proud of that. And she pulled me off to the side, and she said, I'm not proud of it at all. I said, why not? And she showed me the conversion charts. She said in order to fail the algebra EOC, they would have had to have made less than 38% of the questions correct. That would have been a needs improvement score, as the state terms it. 38% correct. To get a mastery, all that you needed was 50% of the questions correct, and you could receive a mastery. And a grand whopping, I don't remember exactly what the total was, it was somewhere between 70 or 75% of the questions correct made you advanced, which is the highest score available. Good God Almighty. So no, MSA is not incorrect whenever it advertises to parents that almost every student who attends the school is going to pass the LEAP or the iLEAP or the EOC, but they're only passing it because you can only fail it if you score less than 30 or 32 or 38% of the questions right. In other words, you only fail it not if you make an F, but only if you make a super F. Now, since the state passed Act 1, very stupidly, the state legislature passed Act 1 of the legislature, the main focus of our school, as most schools, became that test. Whatever the standardized tests were that children were going to take at the end of the year, that was the focus. Now keep this in mind. You can pass it with 38% correct. In fact, here's an article. Okay, here's an article. And I'm just going to read a little snippet of it. It says, would you believe that White's cut scores, that's the curved score, for basic performance on the 3rd grade English language arts test would require students to only get 30% of the available raw points on the test correct to get a rating of basic? A student can receive a rating of basic on 7th grade math by getting a grand total of 23% of the raw points. 23%, and they're basic, they're good to go. A similar level of absurdity of White's raising the bar, as he calls it, is reached when the conversion tables reveal a cut score of 22% correct on the 8th grade math test. So you really do need to take it with a grain of salt, don't you, whenever you receive these shiny brochures from MSA saying what a great school we are. Look at the proficiency rate that we have. You can be termed proficient with scores as low as 40% on some of these tests. And considering that most of the faculty spends almost the entire school year teaching for that one test, then you can start to get a grip of why I think that the MSA is a fraud and a failure. Now, it would be different, perhaps, if we could send out those flyers and we could say, we have over 80% of our students scoring advanced. That would mean over 80% of the students were scoring at least a C. But we can't say that. In fact, the numbers are dismally low for advanced. They're equally disheartening whenever you consider who makes a mastery. So here's looking at you, all of you MSA students and teachers. Don't go bragging about your EOC scores or your LEAP scores or your iLEAP scores or your PARCC test scores. You're passing them on a dramatic curve that shows absolutely zero relation to the true amount of mastery that you have of that subject. Why? Because John White is a political appointee who needs to fudge and finesse the numbers to make himself and his own Department of Education look good. Why does the school go along with it? Because by making John White look good, the school and ultimately the man at the top, Mr. Cavalier, looks very good. Your teachers look good, you look good, everybody looks good, but nobody knows shit. Take that and stuff it in your pipe, but it's the truth. Another thing that I noticed was that as we were entering our 3rd and 4th years, the students at MSA really began to believe that their crap doesn't stink. They began to have an entitlement attitude. I'm at the MSA, therefore I'm special. You can't blame them for developing that attitude. They were told that almost all the time by Mr. Cavalier. It was insinuated and sometimes it was stated explicitly. MSA students are special. MSA students are unique. MSA students are pretty much better than anybody else in the parish. This was always the insinuation, and it did eventually get into the students' heads that they were better than everybody else, and that's just, frankly, not the case. In my personal experience, in those first couple of years of the academy, when the great majority of the students were, well, not the great majority, everybody was new to the school, and the great majority of them hadn't come in from private schools or from other places that focused exclusively on self-esteem. When the great majority of our students were coming in hungry to learn and teachers were hungry to teach, those kids were such better students than the ones who were in years 3, 4, 5. You're not special. In fact, you're not really even learning that much. The whole measure of what you learn is based on state tests that you can pass with getting 20% correct on some of them, and you get a score of basic. Give me a break. You're not special. But you would be told that you are, because apparently whenever you listen to Mr. Cavalier talk about MSA, he likes to compare it to Zachary High. He likes to compare it to private schools in Baton Rouge and to U High. Let me tell you something. MSA couldn't unlatch the bootstraps of U High. If you don't believe me, ask your former Spanish teacher. You're lazy. You're incompetent. And the best thing that MSA teaches you is how to cheat. The reason why is pretty simple, because you got a bunch of new teachers now who rely way too heavily on technology. They think that if it comes off the internet, then that's just the bee's knees. They give you My Math Lab instead of teaching you math. They give you packets that they find on the internet where all you need to do is Google the first question, and once you Google the first question, the whole packet comes up replete with answers, and they call this getting you ready for the test. But then again, I guess it really is getting you ready for the test if you only need about a 38% to get a mastery on some of them. You see, you're not really learning. Don't even talk about the online learning courses that students at MSA take. It's much ballyhooed, isn't it? It's much trumpeted. And while students at MSA are going to be able to earn college credits while they're still in high school through a dual enrollment online program, through partnerships with whatever college, fill in the blank that they choose to go with on whatever year. And it's all a fraud. For most of those online classes, all that you do is Google the answers and you get them. MSA is very good at teaching you that one thing. MSA will teach a student how to cheat more proficiently than any other place I've ever heard of. So you get a bunch of students now, currently at the MSA, who are entitled. They think the crap doesn't stink. They look down on the students at other schools as somehow lesser than them. They really do think that there's something special and that they're actually learning a lot, whenever in reality they're not learning crap and the proof is in the pudding. Because, I mean, how many of them make advanced regularly on their state exams? And another reason that I think MSA had a downfall and is a failure is because every year during graduation, the students walk across the stage and they announce, as they receive their diploma, what their plans are after high school. Of course, most of them plan on going to college. Mr. Cavalier likes to brag that the goal of the MSA is to make sure that all of our students graduate with the letter of acceptance to an accredited 4-year university. Well, most of them do that, although quite a few of them go to BRCC. They walk across the stage. How often do I hear one of them mention an out-of-state school? I mean, here I was. I graduated from Blackman High School with an offer of a full-paid scholarship to Florida State University. I'm sorry, not Florida State University, Miami University. And I graduated from Blackman High School. I remember graduating from Blackman High School, and there was this guy who was offered a full-paid scholarship to Dartmouth. Okay? These jokers graduating with 3.8, 3.9, 4.2, 4.4 GPAs, and they're too scared to even apply to LSU because they think the class sizes are too big. They don't have any confidence. They don't have any character. And they know deep down intrinsically that the only thing that they've really learned how to do at MSA is cheat. You might say, where's the administration on this? Too busy putting together a dance recital and calling it a production. Too busy not administering. That's where they are. So new teachers who rely entirely too heavily on technology. Students who are frankly not learning very much because the emphasis all year long in most of their classes is on the test, and the test is ridiculously simple to pass. I believe that the quality of an educational institution is just like the quality of a factory. You judge its quality based on the quality of the products that it produces. In our case at MSA, the students we produced were our product, and they weren't much. I've had so many of them come back to me and tell me, "Thank you, Mr. Keith, because your class was about the only class that I ever had in high school that kind of got me ready for college." Thankfully, my class was also not a class that was on the EOC. MSA has failed. When you receive those shiny little brochures that trumpeted success from test scores, which, by the way, brings me to my next video tomorrow, the whole test mule factory that is MSA. But they're talking about their test scores and everything. Don't buy it. Don't buy it. Don't buy that. You're being lied to. You're being lied to with the truth, if you can believe that. It is true that those rates of passing the state test or being proficient on the state test, those are true in a roundabout way. I'll explain more of that in my next video. But really? 20% on 8th grade English or math, and you get a basic? 40% is a mastery? 40% of the questions correct? Something's not jiving. And the proof is in the pudding. Go to the graduation and count on your hands how many students say that they're going to B or CC versus how many say that they're going to an out-of-school prestigious university. Out-of-state, sorry. Late at night. Used to gall me every year. Such a successful school, and we produce students who don't even have the balls to go to LSU? Give me a break. This is not a successful program. This is a farce, and it is a fraud. What brought it down were very bad decisions by the administration to open up the school gates broad to anybody who wanted to walk in. We have no entrance exams. We have no testing program for new students to come in. And then secondarily, to focus exclusively on the testing scores and the testing results on state examinations that don't mean crap, that you don't have to know anything. You could almost play connect the dots on your EOC multiple choice. Well, not really, it's on the computer, but you get the gist. Play connect the dots on these tests and almost stand a good chance of at least getting a basic on some of them. But hey, you're special. You wear the purple. You wear the black. You're a knight. And the best thing you'll learn about coming to MSA, how to cheat. Tomorrow I'll be posting a video on the whole apparatus, the whole raison d'etre for MSA, which is to be a testing mule factory that keeps the rest of the parish schools from being taken over by the state. And soon I'll be posting a video on some of my experiences at MSA, personal and experiences that happened with or to other faculty members that are just going to blow your mind. It's time for the people of Iberville Parish to know just what their 31 mil tax funds, just who is Elvis Cavalier, just what is the MSA, and just what is the true definition of a successful school. Because, baby, it ain't MSA, let me tell you. Good night.